Afternoon, everyone. I'm Shashi from the Samriddh Bharat Foundation, and I very warmly welcome you all to this discussion on the Tryst. Joining me today is Uddalak Mukherjee, Senior Associate Editor of The Telegraph. And today's discussion will primarily revolve around the question of representation in media and, of course, the repression about which we all have been hearing lately. Before we begin this conversation, I would like to tell our audience that Mr. Mukherjee was one of the first few editors who not only responded to my correspondence but also agreed to publish my work. And even when a particular article or submission was not suitable for the Telegraph, he took the time to convey it to me. Of course, I mean, nobody's to blame here in the sense that there are certain editors who sometimes do not respond. But despite all of this, Uddalak Mukherjee has made it a point to, I mean, he has responded to all my emails so far. My first question is what it is that sort of informs and drives your editorial approach.
I find it actually surprising that, like someone like you who we published and we've had the privilege of publishing actually, has to raise the point of an editor actually responding back on time or regularly. Because in my experience, I've been working with the Telegraph for 24 years now, and I have been looking after the opinion pages for I think about eight years officially now. Now the Telegraph has always, and this has been always been my first, let's say, journalistic job. I mean, I had worked in other capacities in Delhi and Bombay outside, but my first exposure to newspaper, to editing, most importantly to the ethics of editing. And the ethics of being someone responsible in the role of an editor, and I've climbed through the ranks. I mean, I joined. I'm just giving you this brief backdrop because I think it's important for you to understand something basic, and that is the role of institutional culture in the life of a journalist. And this is actually tied to your broader question because I mean, I climbed to the ranks in the Telegraph in the sense that I joined as a sub-editor, right? So, but the point that I'm trying to make is that a sub-editor may not be doing the kind of work that an editor does, like what I do right now, right? But what an editor does, and I'm sure this is the case with, or should be the case with all publications, is that lay down a set of values, which in turn epitomize the values of the institution. And in this case, I've had the privilege of working for ABP, a 100-year-old organization now, institution, for like about 25 years. So the values that I imbibed and also some of the values that I unlearned have played a very, very fundamental role. And one of the basic things that I've always been taught or I've always seen my seniors do is give value to correspondence. Because you have to understand something. A newspaper essentially, or should be, like, I mean, the media has, unfortunately in India, a very self-inflated image of itself. Given its spinelessness in the last 10 years, it's a bit of an irony that the media thinks that it can shape opinions or change governments or whatever those romanticized feelings are. But the basic accountability of a media, whether it's a television channel, whether it's a newspaper, and by that logic of an editor, is to its readers, is to people who write for the paper. So if the basic responsibility of an editor, one of the principal responsibilities of an editor is to be the bridge between the reader and the writer, right? Now, if I am under the assumption that because I'm an editor, that puts me in a position where I do not need to correspond, or I do not need to correspond on time. Please understand, this is a medium that is driven by time. We work on very sharp timelines and this and that. And what editors should also understand that it's a very competitive market. So if I don't respond to a piece that I think is worthy enough to publish in my paper, somebody else will get it. So I'm not doing a favor to anyone here. I go by the logic that does this piece interest me as an editor and a writer? Does this piece have merit? If you look at the Telegraph, if you look at what the Telegraph has and the opinion pages of the Telegraph have been doing in the last 8 or 9 years, we are probably, maybe apart from the Hindu, I mean, just a little bit, we are the only paper that gives a lot of space to young writers. The opinion page, and despite the fact that the opinion page is super crowded, I commission pieces 1.5 months in advance. And even in that one page, the other pages obviously are the book review page and the art review page, which cater to different kinds of writing. But the point is, for the principal opinion page, you'll see that despite our, like we have a superlative, set of columnists who write for us, very established names. So it's not easy to find space on the opinion page. But what I have always believed in, as someone who believes in democratizing writing, as democratizing newspaper pages, is that what should guide an editor's response to a piece is merit. It doesn't matter who's writing. If Shashi Singh is writing and Shashi Tharoor is writing, and I like Shashi Singh's piece better than Shashi Tharoor, I'll go for Shashi Singh, not Shashi Tharoor, on that particular occasion. So I think it's very important for me or any editor to identify two things. One, be absolutely neutral in the judgment of a particular piece. No other, I mean, at the Telegraph, or at least that's what I do. I do not pay unnecessary attention to a writer's affiliation. And believe me, I have to deal with a number of very important writers who bring their sets of challenges. So if a piece of writing interests me as a reader, as an editor, I make sure that I respond to the contributor on time. Simply because of two things. One, it's basic decency to respond to whether it's a writer. And by the way, it's the same thing with rejections as well. I make it a point to make a writer know that for whatever reasons, and please remember, I mean, there are a number of reasons as a result of which some pieces are rejected. And they do not have to do with the merit of the piece. Sometimes we're just too full, which is most cases, and I don't have the time to explain to a writer that, I'm rejecting your piece because of a number of things. There are issues like timelines. There are issues like whether similar pieces are planned onto the page. A writer doesn't know that. The editor knows that. But the least that I can do is actually let the writer know that, look, I will not be able to publish this piece because that's as I said, there are two things here. It's basic decency and courtesy to do that, because the writer has taken trouble to send a piece, not out of respect for me, out of respect for the publication that I work for, and my accountability is to the publication and its readers and the writers. And the second thing is, as I said, I mean, if you're not quick enough, and if you're not fleet-footed enough in terms of responding to a piece, somebody else will get it. And in a very competitive, environment, I don't want to end up on the losing side by being slow. So it's what I'm trying to say. It's a combination of factors. I'm often surprised because you're not the only one who's actually raised this point about the Telegraph opinion page, that we always respond on time, or at least the writer is actually informed that whether I'm going ahead. And if I'm going ahead, I give the writer the exact timeline. I give the writer, so it's a very, I operate on a very structured level. So just as I know when I have slotted the piece, I believe it's the right of the writer to know that, simply because of my space constraints. Since I cannot publish a particular piece tomorrow, if I'm asking the writer to wait, it is his or her right to know absolutely when is it going. And you've been published by the paper, so you know that we follow a very structured process. So if a piece is accepted within, say, 10 or 15 days, I give the publication date again, because initially the first response is, yes, this piece is selected, and it'll appear, let's say, in May, and the date of publication will be emailed to you a month in advance. And believe me, no writer in the Telegraph has missed a date like that. So I've made it a point to make sure that the writer knows that, okay, so if there's a gap between acceptance and publication, the writer knows. It's a combination of two basic things. I mean, courtesy, ethics, and competition.
Thank you so much. When you were talking about democratization, a question that popped up in my head was, I have heard many people say that, with this obsession with democratization sometimes leads to a compromise on rigor, in the sense that when you're democratizing the merit of the article, or the rigor, how rigorous it is, sometimes that is sort of relegated to, say, a secondary position. What is that What is your position on this?
Yes, I mean, look, I mean, democratization of the page does not mean that every article is given the same kind of weightage. It cannot, because no two pieces of writing is the same. If you look at the opinion page of the Telegraph, you will see that even in that one page, the page is actually split to according to different components. Okay, and we are the only page which is publishing on every single day. We have a main op-ed, which mostly is the best in the business, right? And it is actually that piece pertains to analysis of something which is very contemporary. Let's say the West Asia crisis right now, or whatever is happening in India. So the main op-ed is a very serious analytical piece of a subject which is very contemporary, which is dominating news, etc. So that's the one. Apart from that, on a weekday, we have two editorials. And our editorials, if you see, and as someone who ideates the editorials and writes editorials, etc., you'll see that we often make people think about issues that are not taken up by other newspapers. For just the other day, for example, we had an editorial on, and I'm just giving one lay example in the sense. Just the other day, we had an editorial on how India's obesity problem is double-edged, because not only is India fighting obesity, which is both a medical and a cultural problem, but also violation of anti-obesity drugs. So it's a kind of a double-edged thing. So we try, and apart from, obviously, we continue to write on West Asia, Indian politics, Bengal elections, or elections around the state. These are subjects that need to be reflected. They dominate India's news cycle. But usually the bottom editorial, if you see, we also address subjects that many other newspapers think that they are not worthy enough to pursue. So what I'm trying to say is democratization of a page has to go with a vision of diversifying content. If you are giving the reader 5 articles on a particular page, which caters to the same thing, and I see many newspapers doing that, and because they go with like, okay, so there's an analysis of let's say West Asia from one perspective, there's a criticism, and there's like a counter criticism, but the essence of the subject is the same. I don't want to bore my readers. I mean, I'm not saying that this is the right way, or this is the only way of in running a page. But I believe that, especially in a world where content is it has now exploded, and where we're losing attention span of our readers. One way of engaging readers, one way of bringing back readers to newspapers is to give them choice. Okay, I don't want to read something on social media today because it's my phone timelines or my phones are flooded with the same news. I see the same news on social media. I read the same thing. So, okay, along with that, can I give you something else? So if you look at the second op-ed that we have, and some of your pieces have been actually published on that particular slot, you will see we address or we publish writing which are completely different from the news cycle. In fact, I call as an editor, I call that space the anti-news space. So it's a space that goes against the news cycle. We don't have too much of unfortunately, we don't have too much of space in terms of like it's a 600 word or a 700 word piece that accompanies the main op-ed, but it publishes, that space publishes or the fifth column, for example. On Saturdays, just like today, you see that there is another third article that we publish every Saturday, which is more policy driven. So what I'm saying is, on a page every single given day, and on every given day, my reader has a choice of reading an editorial, of reading a key op-ed, which is something obviously which reflects what is happening in the news cycle. But apart from that, I can also give the reader something that is policy driven. Today, for example, we published a piece on how AI has a role in strengthening India's public PDS system. Right. Then we have that second op-ed space where I give my writers the freedom to reflect on anything. I mean, it's the most, in a way, slightly neurotic space. So I enjoy giving my readers as many flavors as I can. And the second thing is, and this is related to it. So how do I democratize that? Right. For me, the principle is very simple. the only thing that decides publication is the merit of the piece. You'll be surprised to actually know the number of articles that I actually reject on any given day. Not only because that we don't have space, but also because of merit. But some of them come from very heavyweight writers. So my point is that if I feel as an editor that this writing or this piece of this writer has potential, and I will back the writer up to the hilt, and but that doesn't mean I will put a new but talented writer or a piece of writing which does not deserve the lead slot. You know what I mean? I have demarcated the page into several slots so that writers of different potential, established writers, new writers, old writers, each has a slot. So in a sense, it is a kind of even kind of democratization without saying that, oh no, I'm only going to publish the best writers in India. As I said, I mean, the Telegraph is probably, if not the only newspaper to give really young people a chance to write. I mean, we publish on if on a monthly basis the number of university, college, early, say masters, or like people pursuing their PhDs, the kind of writing that we publish, and all around the world. It's not just from India. I mean, you've got people from Europe writing in, America writing, young people engaged. We believe in giving that for. After all, they are our future readers, or they're writing for our future readers. So it's so democratization is not an uncomplicated process. It's a very complicated, structured, nuanced division. And I believe that when you democratize a page, you don't democratize on the basis of hierarchy. You democratize a page on the basis of diversity, where different kinds of writers and different kinds of writing should have their own slot.
Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. When you were speaking about social media and the fact that most of the news is already there, and so it reminded me of an article I read a couple of days ago. I think it was a report by, the name that escapes me, but the numbers were that around 13 to 14% of people, they subscribe to newspapers or they read conventional, forums of information. But around 40 to 50, 60% people, they are, exclusively reliant on Twitter or other platforms. So clearly there's a shift in how news is consumed. The consumption pattern is changing. So, I mean, you spoke about it, but I would want you to flesh this out more. That how relevant is print journalism, the kind of journalism that you do in these times, of course, and how are the journalism schools equipped enough to deal with this change that is happening?
See, I'll address the second part of your question first. I have when I was. When I decided to enter journalism, and it was a decision that I had taken very early in my life, and not because I'd gone to a journalism school. I've never seen a journalism school. I have no idea, and I'm a like a 1980s person, right? So I did my schooling in 1980s, but in the 90s I had the fortune, if I may say so, to have a few friends who were already working in newspaper while I was doing my college, and I still believe, I still remember, like, one of my earlier visits to a newspaper office was the Statesman office, and at that point in time, Statesman was still the biggest newspaper, not just in Calcutta but the East. It held a certain kind of appeal and standard to especially the Bengali middle class, where I come from. And my visit actually, like, completely, I think I was like 16 or 17, and I decided, yes, this is it. I mean, this is what I want to do. I mean, the newsroom fascinated me as a space. I mean, what goes on there, and newsrooms were very different at that. Like, it's not how it is now, full of digital entities than human beings. But the point that I'm trying to make is that I will not be able to really help on what and I'm sure that journalism schools are aware of this. I don't know how much of their curriculum actually reflects these changes, but as I do believe that as AI makes like deeper inroads into the profession, the journalism schools will respond. But my question is not whether they will respond. My question is, how are they planning to respond? Because the important thing that they should remember, and this is just my opinion as a journalist of like over 2 decades, is that the response should not be tailored only through optimizing AI in the sense, oh, you learn AI skills so that you get a job, which is the important thing, but that it should not be the primary thing. What it should teach is, along with these changes that you have to adapt to in terms of technology. When I joined the Telegraph, I think the Telegraph had shifted to let's say the page release pattern, which is the way, as a sub editor, the way I release like 10 editions of the paper. Complete now, it's just like one click on a keyboard, right? I see my colleagues do that, my junior colleagues do that. And when I was releasing 10 editions, it used to take us 30 minutes because each of those editions had like a long structured thing. So technology will evolve, technology will change. The question is adaptation, yes. So journalism schools, I'm sure, are tweaking their syllabuses to teach their students. But this is where I'm coming to. I mean, the point is not just adaptability. Of course, you need to teach students and equip students to embrace AI in journalism. And by the way, I'm not really sure about how much of AI would actually be kind of fused into journalism, because journalism is a very, very, let's say, difficult and sensitive medium. It's unlike what data operators do, although corporates would like to believe that that's what we do throughout the day, just to mindless copy editing that can be done by a machine. But the point I'm saying is that the students should also be taught about lines of resistance to AI. AI brings with it very difficult ethical challenges from the editor to the sub-editor. If a sub-editor thinks, oh, I just can run my copy through an AI machine and my job is done, he or she is very mistaken, because what AI will be doing at its current capacity is replicate every copy, or replicate even say every letter to the editor in the same format. Writing would lose its flavors and readers would immediately spot, oh, this is the same structure. And we can already do that because, as editors, we see increasingly, writers using ChatGPT and, other AI tools to write and submit copies, or submit, their even their job applications, if I say. And there's a standard process to that. Any editor with experience or alertness, I can catch it immediately. Oh, this is there's something fishy about this, because if you surrender the capacity to think critically, and it's not just about making sure that the spellings are all right. It's about an editor's job is to make sure that what Shashi Singh is writing is actually reflected in the final copy, despite the editor's mediation. I don't want to change Shashi Singh's voice. I don't want to change Shashi Singh's style of writing. What I want to do is basically polish where it's necessary. AI will not be able to do that at its current format. What it does, and it's very good at, is standardization. So, it will help in producing a certain template for certain kinds of writing, which would end up being repetitive unless the desk or the sub-editors alert to them. So my point is, what journalism schools should emphasize is, yes, of course, you embrace AI, but you embrace AI as a facilitator. Where can I make AI useful in making sure that my work is error-free? So those are the aspects that journalism schools should. And also, there are two dimensions to changing technology. One, obviously, is your work process changes, and you need to adapt to that. So you need to be taught those skills. The second thing is a huge ecosystem around it. How is AI, or any technology for that matter, how is it making you think as a journalist? Is it making you think? Is it robbing your capacity to think? Is it making you lazy because I have a backup machine which is going to do the more important work? Now, what about your ethics? What about your judgment? When I select a particular piece for publication, am I doing it because AI has turned the news system or the news cycle in such a way that everybody is pouncing on it? These are decisions that AI is bringing to the table for an editor, or let's say the lowest person on the desk. I mean, and I just mean low hierarchically in terms of job, not in any other sense. So journalism schools need to be very sensitive to that. I mean, it's not just about skill. It's not just about skill enhancement in the case of AI. If newsrooms are to survive, newsrooms have to hold their ground. And how do we do it against technology? Other one, as you said, I mean, that's been an inevitable slide, and all newspapers are struggling against it. Loss of readership, more critically, loss of advertisement revenue, which is not going to a rival technology. It's actually just being monopolized. I mean, if you see what's going on around the world, in Europe or in America, battles against big tech on terms of copyright, right? There have been some landmark decisions that have been taken by a couple of courts in America. Europe has done that, or Europe already is fighting a copy. So essentially what happened, Google is, or entities like Google are basically cheating, have been cheating newspapers or other media of content. This is just like how colonialism works. So you have monopoly, you kind of exploit. So it is not a fair playing field at the moment. There are litigations taking place, and if we can turn around this legally, newspapers will survive. There's no reason about that. And the other thing that you have to remember is, and I'm not saying that this is an easy battle. It's almost an existential battle. Young people, I mean, including people who recruit, they don't read their own newspapers. They read the Telegraph on social media, but not the printed copy that he or she actually is involved in publishing every day. Okay. But the point is the integrity that newspapers have. And why do newspapers have integrity? It's because of people like us. Because what Shashi Singh writes is edited first by me. Every single fact is checked by my desk. In fact, my desk asks Mr. Singh that I can't find this fact. Is this true or not? So there are rigorous checks and balances, which is the culture of newspapers, which is the culture of printing. Okay, not just newspapers; it's the entire printing industry, if I may say so. So the remaining nobody. You have to be very clear about one thing. At the present time, nobody's coming to a newspaper to read news in terms of newness. They've already got that news through social media the day before. So newspapers have two things to survive, to survival. Since we can't give news unless it's like some kind of local news, which is not like dominating the international news cycle. So what do? We have two USPs left. One is integrity, and what I mean by integrity is the quality of the news. Unlike this whole culture of misinformation that you see on social media, we make sure that whatever we print has been checked 10 times, right? So it's the solidity of the news that we have to cash on, number one. Number two, we have to cash on what is called as a kind of how do I put it? Let's say the stability of a tradition, because one of the people still, if you look at an editorial in the TOI today, it actually looks at a research that says that no matter, I mean, if you're reading a book, if you're reading a periodical, if you're reading a newspaper, you're still retaining much more than if you read the same thing, even on Kindle. Okay. So the point is our capacity to retain, our capacity to ensure that the readers retain what is an advantage that we have. We have an advantage of something that is tactile. People often underestimate it. I mean, the thing is, when you hold a newspaper and read it, you might find it, especially today's young people, generation might find it cumbersome. Some pages and this and that. But it's the touch of a newspaper is also very important. It personalizes content. Okay, it brings in a personal, intimate association between the reader and the product, which a gadget cannot do, because the gadget is the intermediary there. The newspaper is getting lost in the process. So we have to dig deep within some of our traditional strengths that we've taken for granted and monetize it. and monetize it in the sense that we have to capitalize on those trends, okay, to survive. And the other thing that I'm also seeing is that, look, social media has a kind of a Freudian problem. It runs on innovation because I mean, immersive technology, etc. But that innovation is not permanent. You have to constantly churn out something new to stay in the business. And that innovation is finite. Capacity for that innovation is finite. Unlike a newspaper, which does not run on innovation, what you're looking at every day as a newspaper, it's not giving you something new, but it's giving you something that is quieter, something that is steady, something that is reliable. And at the end of the day, in the long-term business, that's the reason why, despite, and look, I mean, social media is an existential crisis for newspapers. But if you see, newspaper business are a 200, 250-year-old tradition related with printing. And this is not the first threat, that existential threat that we've faced. We faced existential threats from television, then internet, now social media, and we've survived. We've kind of made adjustments, and of course, we paid the price. Look at newsrooms now. I mean, like you've got retentions everywhere. People are firing. People are not reading newspapers, but that doesn't mean newspapers are gone. The ability for newspapers to survive depends on cashing in on its traditional strengths. We do not have to do something new we cannot compete with social media in innovation. What we can compete and hold ground are certain areas that social media cannot replicate. Those are the things that we need to, like basically capitalize for. And that has to reflect in what we do in our everyday practices, in our everyday thinking, especially passing those things on to the younger generation of journalists who come with, and I feel sorry for them because this is a generation that is kind of, caught in between huge technological changes in reading habits, changes, as you pointed out, in the consumption of news patterns, etc. But that is where a newspaper's organization needs to come in the sense that it needs to educate, it needs to tell them that, look, what you're doing at the end of the day still matters. And it's not just for your jobs, it's also to people who depend of that. So I think essentially the future of newspapers will be decided by not what is it's actually its past strengths, which are consistent, stability, integrity, and that doesn't mean we should remain blind to the new realities. We need to get out the best practices from technology, make it as a facilitator, but at the same time make sure that our traditional strengths, our integrity, our readers' touch, those things we don't compromise. Maybe we will survive this one as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mukherjee. So we talked about a lot of things, challenges that newspapers face. So the Telegraph, along with some other newspapers, some digital platforms, is generally considered to be, one of the sort of like last few remaining places where people who say do not toe the line of the government, who do not necessarily subscribe to what the government is saying, they also find a place. So, for instance, you publish articles by Asim Ali, you publish articles by Mukherjee. So, how has your experience been, say, in upholding this commitment?
No, that's challenge, and also you have to understand something. I mean, this is I'm a little amused when people say, oh, the Telegraph is the few remaining bastions of independent writing, and by independent writing I don't mean we're just critical of the central government in the BJP. We are critical of every government, and the public perception doesn't know that, which or whose work goes against certain set values that a newspaper or our newspaper stands for. Now, what are those values? If you look at the Telegraph, there are some very discernible values that we think are important for the paper to uphold, and which is why the editorials are written in a particular manner, defending certain values, right? Now, those values are not government specific. Those values are fundamental values. And what are they? We believe in the constitutional vision of the Republic. What the Constitution envisaged at that point of time is critical for this Republic's existence for this republic's prosperity, for this republic's future. We are not, as a newspaper, till now, we are not, or from, and most certainly in the future, I think, at least, I mean, this is something that, as someone with almost 25 years with the Telegraph, has never felt pressured, is to compromise on that. So we believe in the constitutional vision of this republic. Any government, whether it's the Congress, whether it's the BJP, whether it's the TMC, anybody which is doing something, any policy which is against that constitution or threatens that constitutional vision, we will continue to write against it. And there's a difference in the public, and there's unfortunate difference in the public perception is that we've been very critical of the state government as well. But we are it's just projected because of our location. It's on the east. We are slightly away from the Delhi specific, and the Delhi perception of Bengal, I mean, it's laughable. If you see what Delhi believes to be, and it's laughable only because it's politically prejudiced. If you see some of the things that said about Bengal, the state of affairs here, including the newspapers, you will see, and you'll see that it's very, the reality is very different. So I mean, we have been very critical of the state government that has been here for 15 years now on issues. This is not an ideological thing against, or this is not a political preference. It's a preference that is based on our understanding of which government is subscribing to India's constitutional ethos, to India's constitutional values. As anybody who's subscribing to this will have our support, always. Number one. Number two, we just like our political vision or our ideological vision, which is a kind of fidelity to the constitution, we also support a certain kind of an economic principle. The Telegraph has always stood for pro-market reforms, let's say a kind of an anti state overwhelming Nehruvian model that we used to have. But along with that, we've also been very sensitive to a balanced approach. A GDP growth of 8% doesn't mean that the last man standing on the line needs to be ignored, which is happening in this point of time, or has always happened, because that's a contradiction within the liberal economic position itself and free markets itself. So while we, and especially because in Bengal, I mean, you have to understand, we're based in Bengal. Bengal had a long and illustrious history of being a strong economic contender, which was subsequently absolutely crippled during the left years. So we definitely support industrialization. We definitely support, which is why during the single crisis, when Buddhadev Bhattacharya was trying to bring in industry, the Telegraph initially, before Singur and Nandigram violence, the Telegraph was very supportive of a left government, of a left chief minister. It was revolutionary. Please remember, people only think that the Telegraph is anti-BJP. Please remember something. We have survived in Calcutta under a left government for over 30 years as a newspaper. We started in 1982, and in fact, the Telegraph's criticism of the left, the Telegraph's criticism of the left's economic principles, the Telegraph's criticism of the left's violence, of what the left did to Bengal in terms of its intimidation, was much more potent, if I may say so, than what we do now, or what we've been writing about the BJP. People forget that history, that the Telegraph has always been a newspaper for the voice of the people. Wherever we've seen, it doesn't matter whether it's the CPM, whether it's the BJP, whether it's the Congress, wherever we've seen a government that has strayed from a particular principle or a particular line, whether it's economic or ideological, we've suffered for it. The amount of repression that the Telegraph has suffered from Bengal state government is not something that is discussed. Over the years, we are a 44-year-old newspaper, so we have a long history of that. We started in 1982 when the Left Front was very new. We continued, and by the way, this is what our criticism is not partisan. So when the same Left Front against with Buddhadev Bhattacharya tried to change things industrially, economically, we were supportive of the New Bengal vision, unless it got kind of hijacked by lumpen elements, and we spoke up against that as well. Gopal Krishna Gandhi, who was the governor then, he's one of our most foremost columnists now, and he continues to write for us. So what I'm trying to say is that we, as an institution and as a newspaper, we have been honed by a fire of opposition. We survived that fire. And why have we survived that fire? Because the readers still believe that the Telegraph is opinionated, definitely, but it is opinionated towards a certain kind of template. It doesn't matter who's in power. Today, it's Narendra Modi who definitely has brought a lot of strain on the constitution. If it was Rahul Gandhi doing the same thing, we would have done the same thing. And it's just not in Delhi; it's also in Bengal, by the way. So we've been very critical of the Mamata Banerjee government on certain policies, on issue-based things, and the things that where Mamata has done. Things that seem, let's say, on the social welfare front, some of her programs, some of her policies have made a difference to the ground. We've always acknowledged it. We praised it for her. So it's not a unlike newspapers. The Hindu is left and the Indian Express now is right wing, and we try from our end to see and to act as not as partisan as a partisan publication, but as a publication that stands by its own values. Now, nobody can fault us for having our own values, right? I mean, we believe in a constitutional vision for the country. We believe in a certain kind of an economic template. People have its, people are opposed to that. The Telegraph is a pro-market, pro-reform, pro-industrialization, liberal economics, if I may say so. But that doesn't mean we don't publish people who are. Look at Prabhat Patnaik. He's one of our principal columnists. He is an absolute. We know what his economic position is. We don't choose our columnists on the basis of our own beliefs. What we choose is the best of the business, so that we give our readers, or we are in a position to give our readers, the best of views and opinions from across the political and ideological spectrum. And then it's the reader's choice to choose. We are not an idolatory tool. We are not in a position of. We are not in the business of indoctrination. We are just the bridge between the writer and the reader.
Thank you so much. So, when I told my colleagues that I'll be doing an interview with you, so they sort of asked me to frame a question. I mean, you can choose not to take it, but the question was that, see, I mean, when you were speaking about the way Telegraph operates, you said that your adherence is not to any ideology or any political party. It's rather you uphold a constitutional vision and certain economic principles. But at the same time, the ABP News, the TV platform, there is a certain kind of, if you will, there's a contradiction in the way the Telegraph operates. Of course, there's an operational difference, but structurally they are same. They are part of the same group. So how does that? How do you think about this dialectic?
See, I'm not in a position to comment on that simply because I belong to one tiny component of the group, right? And and by the way, I mean, like, even if you look at Anandabazar Potrika and Telegraph, we are sister publications, but our stresses, our writers, our areas of emphasis, our areas of interest, although we come out from the same stable, is very different. So what other segments of ABP as a media conglomerate does is their respective decisions. I have nothing to do with that. There might be differences. There may not be differences. So that is for the readers to judge, and that is completely the reader's right if they see that they've spotted something different which is perfectly all right. And in a media conglomerate, I don't think an entire group. It's even healthy for an entire group to speak in one voice. What the readers often ignore is that what it reflects is a huge quantum of internal editorial independence. No other house will give at this present hour. No other house will give you the kind of editorial independence that ABP and the Telegraph give to its editors. So the respective editors take their call. And on their own judgment, and also these are different mediums. I think you're talking about television, and you're talking about, and I'm talking from the print perspective. And as we all know, the compulsions of the markets, the readership, the viewership, etc., are very different from a newspaper. So it's their choice. It's their. But what it points to is a group that believes in the principle of giving autonomy to its editors to pursue their own respective things. I think that's something that the reader or the viewer or your colleagues need to keep it in mind. I mean, it's not my business to dictate what ABP News should do. Just as it's nobody's business in ABP News to tell me how I should run my the opinion pages. For that, I'm accountable to my editor. I'm accountable to the chief editor. So there are processes in place. But what it shows you is that we as a group believe in internal autonomy, in internal processes, in internal interpretations of the same news, and that's probably the only reason why I'm still, and I'm very glad to be a part of this group that I respect so much, because I still have the independence to actually, do my work, which is very important in journalism, and which is very endangered in India's journalism.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mukherjee, for this comment and for joining us.